Welcome on in, guys. Three bold takes. Freddie here. I'm joined by Chase and Quinn here. Welcome on into the show. If you're not already, please hit the subscribe button. College football, every single week coming at you, multiple videos a week. Wanted to take this video in a new direction, right? Obviously, today it's Saturday after conference championship week, or it's Sunday after conference championship weekend. And the playoffs were revealed, and that has brought up a conversation about the 12-team playoff starting next year. What would it look like this year? What are our thoughts on that? But before we get into that, click the link down below. Join our Capital One Bowl Mania. Please do that. We want to get some people in there. See if you can pick better than us. We may have a gift for the winner. Who knows? Chase, I want to pass it to you. This is your bread and butter here about the 12-team playoff. You've seen it all over X. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So first off, let me just go ahead and state, you won't be better than us in Bowl Mania, but you can for sure try whatever you want. We've been picking great all year. So if you want to lose and whine about it, you can. So just make sure to click that link. Also, 12-team playoff, man. We've seen 8 great teams this season. And so that has sparked even more. Wow, wish there could have been a 12-team playoff this season, right? And to that, personally, for me, I'm not a 12-team playoff guy. Typically, there's a good 3 to 5 teams every year. It does suck sometimes. Some people get left out. This is just the one anomaly of 8 to 9 teams that, hey, they might have a say in being a top 4 team. And I don't think you're going to get that super often. Like last year, there were only 3, but you put TCU in there as your 4, right? And so that kind of sparks it as how setting it up, because the top 4, of course, are conference champions, which would be decided by the committee. They would all have byes. And then after that, you would have a group of 5 conference champion in there, which this season would be Liberty. And then you have the rest of the top 10 or all the way to 11 in there for the 12-team playoff. So personally, it's just like, are we definitely after this season wanting more of a 12-team playoff than ever, or are you still like, hey, I'm okay without it? Quinn?
I'll start with this. As far as my opinion on the 12-team playoff, I'm not a big fan of it. I definitely prefer the model of doing a 16-team playoff and getting rid of conference championship games, giving out conference champions based on, like, if there's multiple teams that are undefeated in conference play, there's multiple conference champions, whatever, and seeding teams 1 through 16 and starting the playoff on conference championship Saturday or maybe the week after and doing it that way. That's definitely my preferred model. I'm not a huge fan of 12-team playoff, and the reason for that, I don't know if y'all saw the projected 12-team playoff model that they gave. You'd get a rematch of Ole Miss Georgia. I don't care to see that. The game will be in Georgia. It's an exact rematch. You'd get an exact rematch of Ohio State, Penn State, 7 versus 11, I think is what they are, or 10, 7 versus 10. It's the exact same game that we watched in November, or actually October for Ohio State, Penn State. You get Florida State Liberty. That'd be kind of fun. I think Liberty would have a chance. I'll say this, that'll get a lot more toxic too. The debate between Liberty and SMU this year was just kind of like, whatever they put in Liberty. In the 12-team playoff world, that will get so heated for no reason. Like, does it really matter if it's Liberty or, I mean, maybe this year with Florida State's quarterback being hurt, it matters a little because you might get the upset in that scenario, maybe. But most years you're going to play like Georgia. It's not going to matter who's playing Georgia. They're going to lose, whether it's SMU or Liberty. And the other game was Oregon versus Missouri. That one's kind of intriguing, and that's the only one out of those first 4. I can, spoiler alert, Ohio State's going to beat Penn State. Georgia's going to beat Ole Miss. Maybe Penn State upsets Ohio State, but Ole Miss will not beat Georgia. Again, more of a fan of 16-team model personally, and getting rid of conference championship games. than I am. Like, obviously, if you're sticking with 12, you've got to keep the conference championship games because you got to be able to slot a true conference champion 1, 2, 3, 4. But my overall opinions on it hadn't changed all that much. And that's like this year, a 12-team playoff would be great because there's so many good teams this year. Most years, it don't matter.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of years where you're going to get like a 3-loss teams in there and a bunch of 2-loss teams in there. And there's going to be this like handful of teams that are way better than everybody else, like these 2 or 3. But who knows? Maybe I'm judging the future NIL world and transfer portal world on an old model of pre-NIL transfer portal. Because let's be real, most of this 14 playoff era predates NIL and transfer portal. That's only been the last couple of years. We've seen way more parity this year than we have before. I think a lot of it has to do with that. So who knows? Again, personally, not a huge fan of 12 team. Again, it helped this year to get all the like crying and complaining about Alabama and Florida State off the airways. But would it really stop much? What about the debate between Oklahoma, Missouri, Penn State, and Ole Miss? One of those 4 is going to get left out. They're all 2-loss teams.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just shifting where the debate's going to be. That's all it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think whenever you shift the debate down from 4 and 5 to 12 and 13 to 14, I think it's a little bit easier to debate those, and I think you don't run the risk of leaving one of the best teams in the country out of the playoffs. Now, one of the things that excites, because I'm in favor for a 12-team playoff. I think that would eliminate, the Florida States of the world this year. Like, they'd probably get beat in the first round. Maybe not to Liberty, but we got to keep in mind that, the playoff seeding would be different, moving forward. But if you take this year, I don't think the Florida State fans would be as mad because then they would beat Liberty. Okay, you're in. You win a game, but then you play Alabama, right? That would settle this whole debate 4 and 5 this year, and it would be settled on the field. Now, I don't necessarily believe that if the 12-team playoff was a thing this year, that they would purposefully not create these matchups we've already seen, right? They would purposefully keep Penn State, Ohio State away by moving one either position. They'd keep the same 12, but they would create the matchups that we haven't seen before. So, like, Georgia, Ole Miss wouldn't be a thing. It would probably end up being Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Ole Miss. But then you get to see games, and keep in mind, this is the big thing for me. These first-round playoff games are home games for the highest seed, right? So you would have Missouri traveling to Oregon to play Oregon. Like, that's fun to me. Like, you see matchups that you don't see, and it's not on neutral fields because, honestly, I hate neutral field games anyway in the world of college football. College football is designed to be played on college campuses. So I hate neutral field games anyway. But if you go back to last year, right, the 4 teams that would have a first-round bye, the conference champions, Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Utah, those would be the 4 that would be have the first round byes. Then listen to these matchups. Alabama, USC. Alabama would host USC at home. That'd be a fantastic game last year. According to this one, it'd be Ohio State, Penn State again, but again, I think they would probably move those around a little bit. Tennessee, Kansas State in Knoxville. Very cool game, very enticing game. TCU and Tulane, right? So it's sort of like a bowl game where you get to see these games that you don't see on a regular basis, which is what bowl games were designed to do, right? But ever since the playoffs inception and these opt-outs, nobody cares about games that's not in the playoffs. Therefore, you would get to see more quality games. You wouldn't see players opting out very much in a 12-team playoff that you would, if you're playing in the Orange Bowl and you're not in the playoff. No. So I think it's going to lead to better football long-term. I think it's going to lead to interesting matchups and at the end of the day, generate more revenue for the schools themselves as they host playoff games. I think that's electric. Like having USC coming to T-Town, man, that would be fun to watch.
Help me out here. Is the second round neutral site, or do the 1 through 4 seeds also get the benefit of a home field game?
1 through 4,
They should.
they'd be your New Year's Six bowls kind of deal.
See, I hate that.
That's
I think that second round should also be on college campuses, and then keep the quarterfinals and the semifinals and the national title neutral site. Because at that point, I don't mind it being neutral because you're trying to narrow down the championship game.
Well,
but I think those first 2 rounds need to be on campuses.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, what's the reward then? Like, you get a bye week to then not get any revenue in your own city? That's stupid. Like, I think 1 through 4 should get a game in their own stadium. But I get where they're wanting to keep those New Year's Six bowls around just because of how important they are to the history of the sport.
And your sponsors.
But then you look at their 7 games from that point on and 6 New Year's Six bowls plus the national championship. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so then the national championship wouldn't be a bowl. So I get that. I'm kind of in favor for that too because it keeps the history alive. But again, just like you said, there's no revenue coming in for the city. That would come from the bowl game and TV rights, but it wouldn't be in the city. You're right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be for the college town that had one of the 4 best teams in the country that year.
Well, and the 12-team playoff, it sounds great, but for me, I'm just an old head when it comes to this. Like, I just want the BCS. Like, that's I literally I can't even say the 14 playoff. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But Freddie, you mentioned like it would help the Florida States of the world this season, and I'm gonna agree with Quinn here. It's gonna move the post. It's just gonna go to the 13th team now. Oh well, that group of 5, they shouldn't be in over us. We're a better team than them, or I'm better than the 11th seed. I should be in. It's just gonna keep moving it, and we're gonna keep expanding at some point. It's gonna get egregious. And at some point down the road, I think the next 20 to 30 years it will, because we just moved from the 14 playoff, 8 years, 10 years, and
10 years.
And I'm personally in favor of the BCS first. It takes out human error. That's my biggest thing. It just goes off straight to statistics. But
I will say this: I think we should use the BCS model to seed people.
And I like that. And then maybe human. Like a committee comes in and says, okay, Florida State is top 3, but they don't have their quarterback anymore, right? And that helps out. But yeah, I like the BCS model the most. It has been the most accurate, it seems.
I will throw this in too. You said it's going to keep expanding. I don't ever see it going past 16. I think that is definitely the hard cap on the playoff, just because of how the aspect of this still being college athletes and how how they have to put in more time in the spring and summer to graduate because of how little school they have in the fall. I don't see it going past 16 just for the length of the playoff.
Well, if you keep expanding too, you're looking at first, you mentioned conference championships. That's the thing that could be taken away. But second, you also delegitimize the top 25. Like, what's the point of the top 25 really? You kind of might have to expand the top 25 to top 30, top 40 at that point. Maybe.
Not really. Not if you're doing 16-team playoff. You're basically doing the top 15 in the best group of 5.
I don't know, because at some point you go from the top 2 teams, that's what matters, to top 4, and then now top 12 to top 16. It just seems like, we're trying to include more when, yes, guys, let's go ahead and get out of the way. At one point, there will be some Cinderella run when this stuff happens. There will be one. But again, that will be one and far and few in between. It will not be every year some 12 team goes on to run to the national championship or something.
I don't think that's the point. I am an apologist. I personally think the best football playoff model is the FCS playoffs, and they're a 16-team playoff. And what you see in the FCS is not necessarily that the 15 seed wins the whole thing, but it's more that the 15 seed upset number 2 and kicked out who everyone thought was going to be like some surefire champion, or like 6 got seeded with 1 in the second round and upset them, and now the number 1 team's gone because no one saw it coming.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the Cinderella stuff happens, and it helps get teams that are just outside that bubble. So, North Carolina State, Missouri, it gets them more exposure than they get in a 14. I think the 14 playoff limited exposure because it delegitimized the bowl game exposure by using the word playoff. So if you weren't one of the top 4, nothing mattered.
Right.
So you've got to find a way to artificially regrow that exposure pool. 16's not that bad. Like, if you're one of the 15 best teams in the country, you're probably no more than 3 losses. You were probably at one point in the season in a super competitive game. Look at LSU. Do you think LSU is like that much more? Like, are they as good as, let's say, Michigan? No, but are they like that far behind them? Not really. Could LSU feasibly upset Michigan? Yeah. And they're at what, 13 in the current committee rankings?
It's true.